the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilization, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the landing party. I am your host and captain for the evening, Graham Nolan. Today we are talking about the Apple. Captain's log, stardate 2502.05. The Apple, which was written by Max Ehrlich and Gene L. Kuhn and directed by Joseph Pevney. Max Ehrlich was a very successful science fiction novelist and writer of radio programs and TV shows, and was a favorite of the critics. He's just what Star Trek was looking for. A guy that understood sci-fi and the production needs of television. What he ended up submitting was the Apple, a boring derivative outline that seemed like an amalgam of Return of the Archons and Who Mourns for Adonis. Kuhn wanted to like the outline, submitted and was known for latching onto particular ideas or concepts and perhaps overlooking its detriments. Dorothy Fontana was less impressed, as was Roddenberry and Bob Justman. The memos were flying fast and furious as to how to get this story on track. Once again, we are presented with the machine as God concept. NBC gave Kuhn permission to develop the Apple into a screenplay with 3 conditions. 1, it had to be less similar to Return of the Archons. 2, it had to be more believable. And 3, Kuhn was told to toughen up an otherwise soft story. Kuhn sent over the notes from Roddenberry and Justman to Ehrlich, and on May 29th, the first draft script arrived. Not good. It was still too similar to Return of the Archons, but was also now similar to Who Mourns for Adonis. Kuhn wrote a long letter to Ehrlich. It began, "Dear Max, I would be less than honest with you if I did not start out by saying we have ourselves a mess of a problem with this first draft." 21 pages later, Kuhn had mapped out the changes needed and gave Ehrlich a crash course in Star Trek. He went back to work, and the revised first draft was submitted. Bob Justman read it and sent a short, succinct memo to Kuhn. "I have just finished reading the Apple. Please rewrite it." And Kuhn did. He didn't feel like having Ehrlich go back and do it again, so Kuhn decided to take it under his own wings, if you will. So much was needed to be changed and reworked. It even to even bring this less than stellar entry to the screen. What was worse was the production went $20,590 over the allotted budget, putting the second season deficit at this point $137,441 in the red. Now, this is $1967 too. This is millions. So Desilu was bleeding out. Couple notes. Kirk's wraparound tunic returns. After a 3-episode break, Chekhov appears again, and for the first time without the Davy Jones wig. He's wearing his own hair had grown out. So that's his own hair we see for the first time. Celeste Yarnell is the second Miss Rheingold to appear in Star Trek, the first being the beautiful Emily Banks from Shore Leave. And David Soul of Starsky and Hutch, who is still about 8 years away from that bit of fame, appears as a young tribesman, Makora. So that is your captain's log for today, my friends. Let's beam in Aaron Hungers. Hello.
When Aaron hungers, you must feed Aaron. Um, as I was watching this episode last night, that is the first thing that came to my mind was, this is like the Landru episode, right?
Yeah.
And at least Kirk didn't confuse the giant robot snake thing into exploding. They actually used, some logic, if you will, into how to destroy this machine by cutting off its fuel source and then, hitting it with everything they've got. So I give them credit for making those changes. But yeah, it's kind of interesting what you said in the captain's log, that it's unfortunate that an episode that's really fairly mediocre all the way around ended up being one of the more expensive episodes. They must have just been cringing going, we got a crap episode and we're spending all this money on it.
Well, they had to build the set and rent out all the fake trees and plants, or real trees and plants, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
And then they had to build the big Vol, originally in the first round of scripts, it was sort of like a building. And then they got the idea to make it the serpent head, that they could walk into and, play out that thought line of it needs to be fed,
Right.
by putting the food into the mouth. And that was expensive. They had to make this paper mache cave thing. And
I wanted to correct me if I'm wrong. You may know this, maybe you don't, but I thought I read someplace that they covered that thing with aluminum foil and then painted it. Like that's just like on that, creating that Vol head, like that whole face, how it's all kind of crinkly and stuff.
Right.
That was aluminum.
Well, the special effects crew that I read about said it was paper mache.
Okay.
It
I
was
don't
designed.
remember where I heard that from.
What's the designer's name? There's like a picture of it here. Hold on a second.
Yeah, they were so far over budget. They had everybody take their leftovers out of their refrigerator at home and bring all the foil paper, foil tinfoil they had. And
Matt Jeffries.
Yeah,
Here's
Matt Jeffries.
There's the original design.
Matt Jeffries came up with the Jeffries tube.
They
Just
named
saying.
the Jeffries tube after him. He designed the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did like the fact that they created this sort of like monster idol, this monster look. It was like something out of a Conan the Barbarian movie, that story with the big serpent head carved out of the rock,
Mm-hmm.
So I did like that quite a bit. But I really felt like the beginning of this, I thought it was really uneven, this episode. They first land down there and you got poisonous flowers, you got exploding rocks, which didn't ever really tie into the rest of the episode. It was kind of like they were just there to create menace for the first part of the episode.
Well, I think those rocks, those high energy rocks, were supposed to be what they fed Vol for energy.
That would make sense.
Because Vol was a machine, and
Right.
let's say like a locomotive needs coal.
Right.
This perpetual machine needs energy somewhere, and I believe that was what it was supposed to be for. Not only was it because Spock talks about the energy, it could be a great energy source. Well,
Right.
they were using it as such to feed Vol.
It's interesting that they didn't go with that, because that would have made probably more sense than him feeding grapes to him.
Yeah, I mean, for them to be feeding them melons and grapes and fruit and shit didn't make any sense.
No.
Yeah. And poor Spock, he gets hit with the plant things.
Yeah.
And then he gets zapped in the back by lightning.
Yeah, he got the crap beat out of him in this episode. I also thought it was funny that he was able to snap that rock in half and it didn't blow up, but then when he just tossed it over to the side, it exploded.
Right. Yeah, you'd think that
breaking it
would cause it to explode.
Right. And it's one of those weird things where he didn't even need to do that. He could have just picked up the rock, examined it, and then tossed it, and it blew up. Why have him break it and then toss it? It doesn't make any sense.
You can say it's light, but you don't have to say it's fragile in the way that it breaks. And then because the whole point of it is to discover that it's an energy source that would explode.
Right.
Yeah. And there's also Kirk too in this. Like it's almost like they wrote it for Jeffrey Hunter. In that Captain Kirk is very introspective and beating himself up over decisions he made, and the weight of command, and yet that goes nowhere. There's never any resolution or turn around like, yeah, I did what I had to do,
Yeah.
I'm Kirk, damn it.
Yeah. And it's really hard in these episodes when you have a crewman die, right? But then you have sort of lighthearted banter after the commercial, and they go, his guy, there's a guy laying dead right over there, You're
Right.
gonna I mean, I know you have to move on, but it's kind of like there would have been more somber and things like that. There was some lighthearted, Kirk picking a flower. If you remember that, he walked over, and that was after the crewman had just got shot with poisonous flowers, and he's over there, oh, paradise, and you're just like, wait a minute. And then the security guard, the stealthy security guard, is over there looking at the village going, oh, Kirk, this is whoever he was. Wasn't that the same guy that died in Cat's Paw, by the way, the same actor? At the very beginning
he
of the
was
episode?
in another episode.
I
Yeah,
think he's the
as
one
a
that-
different character. It could have been Cat's Paw. Mal,
And,
yes, it was. When he's the guy who, beamed up and was
right,
dead.
and fell dead, right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he's like, secretly talking to Kirk, and this, and then they lose transmission, right? And then he just comes running, recklessly yelling,
Yeah.
like what is he, 12?
Yeah.
Look what I just,
Yeah.
and it's like,
You're not going to believe.
yeah.
But then they never tell us what this exciting thing was that he saw.
Well, like, yeah, right. I assumed it was Vol, but
I don't know, because they were you had to walk, you had to trek to Vol, it seemed like,
maybe it was the hot village women
with those hippie tattoos on their faces and stuff.
Yeah, maybe that was it. He's like,
Yeah, maybe.
There's alien chicks here, Kirk.
Yeah, with really, really terrible wigs. That's another thing is the aliens look terrible. Those dopey shoes, the sandal things they were wearing, the paint.
Which came
it's
up
funny
on
too,
Kirk's
because when they go to attack the landing party, and Kirk, he does like this, like shoulder block or something like that. The dude's red paint that was all over his skin is all over his shirt.
Yep.
And then it disappears,
Oh, well, it's but I did notice that they did go out and get pretty buffed. All the dudes, were in pretty good shape that played the villagers. So you had these kind of hulkish characters.
Yeah, like bodybuilder or weightlifter dudes.
Yeah. So I guess that's one thing, but it was just a very, very strange episode. And then you've got the romance between Chekhov and the cute blonde girl.
We never saw before, and we never saw since.
Yeah, I know. It's like if they're that hot and heavy, why are we not seeing her in another episode, or just once in a while? It's very. I hate it when they did stuff like that, and it might have been just budget, right? They didn't want to pay someone else to speak, right? So, but then don't make the role. There didn't have to be. I guess there did, because they saw him kissing, right? And that was kind of a part of the. But yeah. You'd like to you would like to think that give us the breakup episode now, with Chekhov and the girl, have her.
There's another first in this one, actually, because it's the first time we hear Chekhov's first name. She calls him Pav.
Yeah.
She doesn't say Pavel, she says Pav. That's the first time we hear that. He was just Chekhov or Mr. Chekhov up until that point.
And it was funny when they're down there, right? And I can't remember if security guard was dead yet or not, but him and that chick are just, hugging and getting ready to start making out. And Kirk's like, I know you guys find each other fascinating, but
yeah.
Like, why are you guys are on security detail? You're not going to be making out, right in the landing party.
Yeah. That is a really weird thing. I mean, the landing party was so big, it had to take 2 beam downs to get everybody down there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a first too. The landing party was that big. And I think the part of the yeoman was written for Janice Rand originally, because a lot of these scripts are carryovers from the first season and stuff. and the dress that Yarnell wore was Janice Rand's dress. They tailored it for her, and they shortened it because she had just gotten back from Europe, and she said, the girls are wearing these really, really short dresses, so they skimped it up on her a little bit more.
Yeah, Roddenberry probably didn't mind doing that. So yeah,
No,
let's make that dress shorter.
Yeah.
There was some good. I did. Now you might have thought it was corny, but I kind of like that. There was no real purpose to the scene, but I did find it kind of amusing where they're in the tent and they're trying to explain how they reproduce to her, and he like puts it on Spock, and they cut to McCoy looking at Spock, just waiting to hear what he'll say, Well, I assume that they would receive the proper instructions, and McCoy's like, now that I'd love to see.
Yeah. Hey, we got some good intel here from We Whiz Magas for $5. This is probably Russell. For a much, much better look at Yeoman Martha, check out the 1971 exploitation flick, The Velvet Vampire.
Was she in that?
Yeah, she is in that.
Did you actually see that after I told you about it, Graham? Did you watch that movie?
The Velvet Vampire?
Yeah, because we were talking about that on the Professionals, and I brought it up as some sort of obscure vampire flick, and I told you guys a little bit about it, and you were like, I'm going to check that out.
Oh, was that the one? No, I have not seen it yet.
It's that 70s hippie kind of... It's I saw it on American Movie Classics, and it's I don't want to call it a sex romp because it's not, but there's a little bit of nudity in it, and I don't remember her. Gosh, and I don't want to watch it again because it's horrible. But I watched about halfway through, and I was like, I can't take any more of this. But I can't remember her being in it. But now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up. I wrote it down here, so I'm gonna definitely look it up now. See if I can't catch that. Could be on my 31 Days of Monsters if it's really bad.
You can check it out. Let me know what you think.
Sometimes you got to have some stinkers on there because they're fun to talk about. Same thing with this show. Sometimes the bad ones are more fun to talk about. Than the mediocre ones. This one is not quite bad, but it's there is some good stuff in it, as you had said. I really like when Kirk is calling up to Scotty. And Kirk says, so there's nothing to worry about. And Scotty goes, well, I didn't exactly say that, Captain.
And I love the line about him. If you don't get
really good.
Yeah. If you don't get this thing, fixed, you're fired. And then he fires him, when I that whole sequence was really, really good. I think they effectively used every major character in this episode. I don't think anybody felt like they were just kind of hanging around, and they all had legitimate reasons for being there and being involved. And no, I'm like you. I don't hate the episode.
How dare you?
Yeah. Look at Mr.
Look at who's wearing a Batman shirt.
Yeah, I know.
We're
nerds. From a Batman shirt calling us nerds. Okay. All right. So make sure we got that clear. And the ending, the part about where Kirk goes, are you casting me in the role of Satan?
Yeah.
Is there anybody on this ship who remotely looks like Satan? I mean, I love that bit too.
That's pure Gene Coon, that kind of funny banter at the end.
Yeah.
And I particularly like that kind of stuff. I think that is part of Star Trek's charm, is that, depending on how serious the episode was, right. I mean, Kirk did lose like at least 4 red shirts in this one.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty high death count for that. But that lighthearted bit, and then the ship flies away to new adventures. Right. I like that.
I did. The only we did criticize that. In what episode was it where, was it? It was the Changeling, where he's like, my son, the Doctor, kind of gets you right here after he just wiped out an entire
solar system or something.
Yeah. Probably not the best time to be making that joke, but I figure as a captain, you're going to lose. You're going to lose, man. That's part of the deal, right? Got to have a little, keep yourself even keel. So I liked it better at the end of this episode than I did at the Changeling.
Yeah.
Even though isolated, it's a funny little scene, but then it's like, how appropriate is it for the
Yeah.
context of the rest of the episode? I thought this one was fine.
Yeah, we don't know actually in the Changeling how much time. Well, in the Changeling, it was we do know how much time passed, but in this one we don't know. I mean, Kirk's climbing up that ladder again. It could have been days.
Mhm.
So he wasn't like back on the bridge, like he'd beamed up there and stuff. So I get the feeling that time had passed. Maybe a week, a few days, or something like that, and they're just discussing it.
Right, because Spock would have had time to contemplate, what they had done, and then come to a conclusion that he wanted. Of course, him and McCoy. This starts with them just fighting about it. And what was the thing that they were when they were hiding in the bushes looking at Vol? They had that great scene back and forth with Spock and McCoy talking about whether the society was legitimate or not. And Kirk's just sitting there and finally goes, "Gentlemen, this is not the time to debate this."
Right. McCoy's saying there's no growth there, and Spock, there's an argument about the Prime Directive, basically, interfering in the natural development of that civilization. And, Spock's argument was that they're happy, things are provided for them, and this is their society. This is what they've known. So, and then Bones, of course, the emotionalist, they're not growing, they're not, evolving, they're not blah, 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 blah. They don't even know how to bang each other.
Well, it is interesting though, because I thought that was an interesting discussion, because I did stop. I was watching the episode for the first time and really think about that and go, are they interfering? By destroying this? I mean, on one hand, I get the idea that they're serving a machine. So is that really a legitimate society for humanoids to be serving a machine?
Mm-hmm.
And yet they were completely content and happy and taken care of. So, you can kind of see that. And all the problems that are going to arise from that society now that they've been, introduced to free will, if you will. And
they're already starting off like hippies. So, it's going to turn into some filthy hippie society.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing they did, though, to kind of soften that blow or manage that was have them learn to kill.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which had nothing to do with the Enterprise crew. It had, that was what
Val told them.
Right. So that corrupted them in a sense already,
mm-hmm.
I think. And that's sort of, at that point, I kind of felt like, okay,
mm-hmm.
now you got to step in, because even if would Starfleet really be okay with them sacrificing 400 of its people and a ship, to not destroy this computer that was running the society?
Right. Well, the difference between that and what they did with Landru was that some of the society was rebelling against it.
Right.
So they knew that people were wanting out of that societal system of the God machine, so to speak, which is like a running theme for Roddenberry. I'm not sure if he was an atheist or an agnostic or what, but he just he always wanted to tell stories about God, and humans tend to be better than or smarter than or machines are the God that these humanoids are worshiping. It sort of comes across to me like he didn't really have much of that in his life.
No, definitely. And but specifically to this episode, it kind of begs the question, well, who set up that machine in the first place?
Exactly. In fact, that was some of the notes that was going by between Kuhn and Fontana and all the producers of the show. Dorothy wanted to know, well, who set up this machine? And Kuhn was like, it's okay if it's just a mystery. But, I tend to... I always find myself leaning towards Dorothy Fontana's critiques of the scripts, the changes she wants to make.
She was
that
very
either
sharp.
get done or don't get done.
Mhm.
And I usually find myself on her side.
Yeah, she was very sharp
Yeah.
and really had a grip on this show. And it was, it could have been, it would have been an entirely different episode if you would have spent, time trying to figure out what this thing was there for and how it got there, because that goes to their argument about whether or not it's a fruitful society or not, or a growing society. It would depend on who set this up in the first place. Was there a society there that then they, kind of like Landru again, where, it was a chaotic society. So you get this order by this machine that provides this order to this now primitive society, like they almost started over,
Yeah.
and so that would have, given credence
Right.
to
Or,
one.
or was the machine set up from another alien race?
It
Maybe
was
trying to control these creatures. Prevent them from retarding their growth, uh,
right.
so they can't follow into space or whatever it may be.
Right. So then you could have said, well, this alien race came here and they screwed up society first, and we're just setting it back to where it needs to be.
Right.
That would have justified their actions a little bit more as well. Billy Tucci's
Let's
there.
see. Let's see what this big Star Trek fan has to say here. Roddenberry was extraordinarily keen on predicting future events and threats. Just look where we are now with AI, robots, and how billions of lives live only to serve a machine, the iPhone. Well, that's true. Also, hospital, the panels in hospitals that take your vitals and stuff like that. The iPad, as they're walking around. They used a stylus to write on that thing. Yeah,
But
there's
now,
a lot of.
I was just saying, now we feed Vol with money, not with grapes and melons.
Yes, but would it have hurt us to gather a few leaves, few little leaves?
I hated that part. That's an episode I missed. I don't think I was here for the Who Mourns for Adonis. But it always bugged me that, Kirk goes out of his way to destroy Apollo. And at the end, he's like, well, would it really have hurt us to gather just a few leaves? And you're like, what?
Yeah. See, there's another example of somebody superior appearing as gods to the early humans, but they had abilities and stuff. They weren't really gods. They were lifted up because of our own belief system. So again, it's not. He's dancing around that again. And it's the same plot basically. You've got this powerful entity on the planet causing threat to the Enterprise up there, and then you've got the threat down there with the away team that's down there. So you could see the similarities between that, and then you have again with the Landru, same thing. The computers running everything, and they have to take it out. And
I was actually really I'm really surprised because I've never watched Star Trek so with purpose like I have since we started this show. Watch each episode to really sort of break it down, and it's amazing how similar so many episodes are thematically. And you almost wonder if like you said, Roddenberry with this whole thing about God kept influencing some of this stuff. Because it's very strange how similar many of these episodes are. Kirk outsmarting the computer controlling people, and they have to free him from the computer. Interesting.
But then when we get to Bread and Circuses, I need to look up and see who actually wrote that script and who had a hand in that, because that goes in an entirely different direction than what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it does actually sort of recognize the existence of God and Jesus for that matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe Roddenberry was out on vacation that week.
Yeah. There was a point where he's in the hospital with a breakdown, but I don't know if that was first or second season. I think it was first season because he was, I think he was, Kuhn was handling most of this. Hey, Dent Masterson, thank you for the $1.99 super sticker. Appreciate it.
In a sort of generalized sense, I mean, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but in episodes like the bread and circuses and the Nazi episode and those type of things, or Piece of the Action, which will be coming up this season, did that bother you to have them like parallel Earth scenarios, or did you find it kind of interesting just as a general concept, not in one particular episode?
Well, yes and no. Yes, I thought it was interesting, but they did it too many times. They went back to the well too many times with that theme. And again, it's budgetary. It's
Sure.
an easy one to do. Okay, we've got this set. It's set up for James Cagney movies. We're going to set this thing in the 20s. We got all this shit here. Don't have to create anything new. We can rent all this material we need, or Desi Lou might have it on the lot.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's too much of that, which is, I think that was a problem.
You know what we should do when we get through all 3 seasons? We should pick our top 5 episodes. Each of us pick our top 5. Be interesting to see what, if there's any thematic redundancies. I'm thinking of my top 5, and I don't think there is in my mind, but I do like all the episodes that, some people think are corny, like Piece of the Action and, the Nazi one and those type of things. Even the Omega Glory to a certain degree, right? Because that was a parallel to Earth in a lot of ways as well.
Yep. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. Another thing to throw out there, Graham.
Yeah. Thank you, Frankie says, which parallel Earth story would you give up? Piece of the Action, Bread and Circuses. For me, I'll give up none.
Well, that's more directed at you because you said they did it too much. And
well, you could also say Miri.
Yeah.
Must be a conversation I'm missing. There was Miri. They go back in time. Tomorrow is yesterday.
Yeah. And also Edith Keeler.
Yep, Edith Keeler. Although that's a time, it's not really a parallel world.
That's true.
Well, so is the one with the first kiss. The one I said I hate.
Oh yeah.
Plato's Stepchildren.
Stepchildren. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so now we're back in Rome or some
Right.
type of Roman thing. You know what? I'd give that one up in a second. Thank you.
Me too.
Patterns of Force. It's another one. That's the Nazi one. But yeah, the Plato's Stepchildren, that and The Children Shall Lead, we can just excise from the entire catalogs if you want to know the truth. I just hate those. I mean, almost every Star Trek episode I can watch, I'll be like, God, this is good. This is cool. This is all right, but it's still fun. It's,
Yeah.
But those two are like, and there's probably a couple more in the 3rd season where I'm like, that I might be willing to put on that boat and cast adrift. But those two for sure.
I'm not a big fan of the, what was it? The Paradise Syndrome, where he thinks he's an Indian.
Oh yeah. That's another one. Another parallel. There you go. Yep. There's another one.
Yep.
Parallel Earth. You got Indians that speak English.
Yeah. Well, and it's another episode where Kirk is just feeling sorry for himself.
Right.
It's like Kirk is like, he's
the burden of command.
Yeah, it's just like, that's
Miramani!
Yeah, Miramani!
Miramani! I am Gorak! When he's up there and they're stoning him.
Yeah. I just, those are the things, and that brings us back to this episode, which we just already mentioned, but that whole thing about Kirk questioning his command decisions, things like that, that is so not Kirk. You know, you might do that once under an extreme circumstance, right? But
Yeah,
you
they
know,
had him do that in the Corbomite maneuver, you know, when he felt like he was put into a corner, and then he's in his room, and Bones comes in with a drink, and you know, he says, 430 people look to me for the answer. What if I'm wrong, Bones? You know, and then he says, and he starts to say something. No, I don't expect an answer. Well, I have one for you. You know, in the universe, there's a billion possibilities. You know, that whole line.
right.
Don't destroy the one named Kirk. You know, and then he's back at it, and then
But that was more believable because it was a private moment between him and his doctor, where maybe he had a moment where he was like, and I think they were also kind of hearkening back to the Jeffrey Hunter pilot.
Mhm.
Because they had almost an identical scene between, Jeffrey Hunter and the doctor.
Dr. Boyce. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm wondering, because that was a very early episode, the Corbomite movie. Was that the first one they, no, I can't even remember now. What was the first one they filmed?
Corbomite maneuver.
Yeah. So that, that might have been just kind of revisiting that sort of idea, but it's almost like if you do that in the first episode, you put it to rest, because you see that Kirk is a guy that he thought about it and he's like, no, I'm, in charge of this, and I'm confident I can get this done. And you don't really need to go back to it. And the fact that they continually go back to it haphazardly, like almost like for filler. Oh, we need 5 minutes. Let's have Kirk, feeling bad that, and it is fine that he feels bad. I like the fact, like in the Devil in the Dark, where he's like, he doesn't like to lose a crewman, and it really affects him negatively. But
you can see how it affects him, but he's not verbalizing it.
Right, and he's not questioning his command decisions. It's just like sometimes that stuff happens, right? It's like being a general in a World War II or Patton or somebody. You're sending guys out there to fight, and some of them are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the job, right? You got to do it. And it's not because you made a bad decision necessarily. I mean, if you did make a bad decision, but Kirk didn't make a bad decision in this episode. He was ordered to go down there and investigate and to meet this society and find out about it. So, he doesn't know the rocks are going to explode. He doesn't know that the flowers shoot poisonous darts.
Right.
Although,
yeah. But more importantly than that, they didn't go anywhere with it.
No. Right. They didn't pay it off.
They just left it as a dangling plot thread out there. And then, there was no resolution. There was no action that Kirk did to reinforce his decision-making process, to bring him back around to, rah-rah.
Right. And they even brought it back up when it looked like the Enterprise was going to burn up in the atmosphere, right? They're back in the village, and McCoy is sitting there, and he's like, 400 people, I should have disobeyed orders. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to say. You would never, that would even be a consideration. That's why you join the service, right? Is you don't go in there and say, well, I think the commanding officer is wrong. We're supposed to go and investigate.
Right.
And I should have just said, no, I'm not going to. I mean, it was dumb.
There was some, as I said, there's some great interactions with Scotty on the bridge, to look at some of the positives here. There's also this great sequence with Chekhov when he says, oh, the Garden of Eden, it was just a little outside Moscow, and Kirk, who's had his fill of all this Russian shit, is like, just outside of Moscow. Okay. The way he delivers that line just cracks me up. He just outside of Moscow. Okay. And then they go off and they do their thing. I really like that.
Yeah, there is good. I mean, I don't dislike this episode I'd watch it if it was on, I'd watch it. It is entertaining. There's a lot of funny bits in it and a lot of nice bits in it. I don't know if we were talking about this backstage or actually said this at the beginning of the show, but the whole, did I say about Vol looking like in a Conan story?
That was backstage. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a cool idea, rather than, cause you had said originally that the idea was it was supposed to be just a building or something.
Yeah.
and they changed the idea and said, let's make it this rock formation of this serpent or all that. And that was really cool. And the whole thing about them, I mean, they were in a really tight spot in this episode, right? You got the Enterprise is going down. They've got to solve the problem on the planet, and they don't even know if they can solve the problem on the planet, until the very last minute, they finally figure out that, don't feed Vol.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like when they, it says, the little one, what are, the little ones that just keep doing what you're doing. You'll find out soon enough.
You'll find out. Yeah, you'll find out.
You hippies will find out.
Yeah, you crazy hippies. Smoke a little of this weed over here. You'll be fine. Yeah. So did Kirk say that they were going to beam down a bunch of engineers and people like that, right? So they're beaming down a crew that they're in, or a party that they're going to leave there to be in charge of this civilization to get it up and running is my assumption, right?
Yeah.
So if you're the crewman that gets stuck with that assignment, you're like, okay, so I'm going to be stuck on this Vol planet for 2 years. Make sure you don't step on any rocks and watch out for the dart shooting flowers.
But you have to teach these people how to procreate.
Yeah. Well, I guess would he do it by example? Here, let me show you.
Depends on which crewman gets sent down.
Anthony Mark says, for me, the Prime Directive debate elevates it to a 7. That actually that's kind of the core of this whole episode. You got the other stuff going on, but it really comes down to that: should they or shouldn't they have done this? Mm-hmm. Which I do like about this episode. Yeah. I admit.
And the part where after they kill the fourth red shirt, whacking him over the head with that tuning fork.
Yeah.
When Spock says, well, Doctor, you were worried about them, growing as a society. I would say you should worry no longer, or whatever, that, they've learned to kill.
Yeah. They've taken the first step. They've learned to kill.
Yeah. I thought that was a powerful statement.
It was.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, yes, I did see he's going to be at SummerCon.
Is that up by you?
Yeah, it's in Washington.
Oh, okay. Cool. Thank you, Larry.
That's right, for 2 big ones. Yeah. So in that moment, you almost kind of you kind of see Spock's point, because he's a guy of logic. He's a guy, he's not someone that would support violence in any way. And so you have this orderly computer run society that's now going to get replaced with all the problems and the concerns of human beings, which is that, quite frankly, Spock doesn't really have a lot of patience for, emotionalism, anger, violence, all these things that his planet has completely eradicated through logic. And so it was a very like you said, it was a very poignant statement at that moment, So they did make sure in the script that there were moments, at least, of value to kind of work around the silliness of some of it.
Yeah. But that is true with almost every one of these Star Treks, is that there is always something in there. You can find some bit of dialogue, some sequence, some nuance that at least resonates and is cool. With the exception of The Children Shall Lead and the Stepchildren.
Well, no, Plato's Stepchildren is power corrupts, ultimate power corrupts ultimately, right?
Right. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely. That's what it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but that's a cringy episode. Those are when you're watching either a movie or a television show where you feel uncomfortable and awkward while watching it. That's bad.
Or worse, you're watching it and somebody walks in and sees you watching it.
And Kirk's going with a midget riding on it, or a dwarf riding on his back.
One of the truths of the world is that if you watch any movie that has, let's say, some uncomfortable sex scene in it, any kind of rated R picture, you'll be watching that thing, the whole thing. That one sex scene comes on, and that's when your wife walks in the room.
I think you're watching porn or something. And you're
it's like, what are you watching?
this is a Scorsese film. I didn't know, you know.
That's what it always happens.
Well, it's funny because I've actually done that to Shelley. I don't think she's ever done that to me, but I've done it to her a couple times, like where she was watching Game of Thrones, for example.
Oh.
And I come walking in right in the middle of some medieval sex scene. I'm like, what are you watching? She's like, I had no idea, you know.
I didn't know you smoke, Shelley.
What's going on in here?
What's going on?
Oh gosh. So yeah, that has happened more than once. It's so funny though, because that's where you don't expect to walk in your wife, but she was watching Game of Thrones, and apparently there's I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones, but I guess there's some
I've seen a couple, and I know what you're talking about. Like the first couple episodes, to see if I would get into it, but I'm just not into that genre. It's not.
I thought, is this X-rated Robin Hood? What are we watching here?
And the Merry Men of Sherwood.
Exactly. There was another show that Lucy Lawless was in, and I guess she was topless in it or something. It was one of those shows. It wasn't Game of Thrones. It was a Roman show though.
Oh,
it was pretty popular there for a while, and but Lucy Lawless was in it. You guys would know. I don't remember if Shelley watched that one or not.
Yeah, Henry, it was in the captain's log.
And they did give him all the lines, other than the leader. It was him and David Soul got all the lines of the, villagers.
Right.
Lynn Green, Spartacus. Yeah, that's it. That was what it was.
What's that guy's name? Andis. What's that actor's name?
The guy that was the leader of the village? That guy was ripped, man. He was huge.
Keith Andis. He was 47 years old when he in that episode. He'd been around like in the early 50s as a kind of a leading man in B films. He never really made it, but had plenty of turns. He was 47 when they shot this.
Dude, that guy was huge.
Yeah, he was big. He's like 6'2". You keep your pants on the whole day. That one uncomfortable sex scene comes on, and that's when your wife walks in the room every time. Well, I try to keep them on even then.
Yeah, you want to be careful there. Yeah, Rick says he made Kirk look like a kid.
Yeah, well, Shatner's not that big.
No,
he's not that tall. Well, what's funny is when you see him in the Ultimate Computer against William Marshall. Now Marshall was like 6'4", and there's that scene where he has to subdue. Kirk has to subdue Dr. Daystrom, and his arm is trying to get up around his neck, and he's trying to pull the arm, and William Marshall's got to kind of help him get the arm around.
Yeah, and he's like kind of leaning back.
It's sort of awkward,
Reach him. Yeah. That always cracks me up that you get in the world of Hollywood, and it's like all the actors and actresses for the most part are short, right? So you don't have any way to compare. Well, Kirk's 6 foot, he's 6'2" or whatever. Then you actually have someone walk in there that's like 6'2", and he looks like he's 7 foot tall compared to these guys, Like Clint Eastwood was a freaking giant,
Yeah, he was 6'4".
John Wayne.
Yeah, John Wayne was 6'4". Chuck Connors was 6'5" or 6'6".
Yeah, and then you got to do like their love interest, and the girls are on those cases. The girls are standing on boxes, so they can get up at least in the same frame with them.
It's funny when you see guys that are like these leading men type guys that are short, like Alan Ladd. Alan Ladd was like 5'4".
Yeah, tiny.
And when he's in Shane, he's going up against Ben Johnson, and Ben Johnson was probably 6'1".
Yeah.
And yet, so they're standing there at the bar, and the camera's at mid level. So it gets the whole head and upper torso in there, and Alan Ladd's belt line is right up to like Ben Johnson's chest. So that either Ben Johnson's standing in a hole or Alan Ladd's standing on a box.
Right. Man, that must have been really difficult to maintain your confidence, maybe, or in some cases arrogance from these guys when they, they were forced to stand on boxes and stuff like with their leading ladies. Some of those guys had to, like Alan Ladd's a guy that would stand on something so he was could stand.
Well,
be,
some of
you
those guys,
taller than his-
I think Alan Ladd was one. Was stars don't stand on boxes. The supporting players stood in ditches.
But you can kind of fool yourself into saying that, but it's kind of like it's still the reality is you're a shrimp. And
but then there was guys like James Cagney, who was short, but nobody ever thought of him as short. He had a large head, large hands, and he was a tough little Irishman. In real life, he grew up on the East Side, same era as Kirby. He was tough Irish guy, and you could tell he knew how to fight,
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I don't remember, I'm trying to think of any Cagney movies where, there was long shots and he's, like if he was a gangster, his guys were bigger than him, but he didn't care because he carried himself in a way that
it's exact. He could be up against Barton McLean, who would be towering over him, and he could back him into a corner because of the intensity,
Yeah. Which is funny because he's a song and dance man at heart, and you don't, and that's the same with Christopher Walken, who everybody thinks Christopher Walken is creepy, and maybe he is, and all this, intimidated, but he was a song and dance guy.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean that they weren't, I don't know about Christopher Walken, but I know Cagney grew up in a tough neighborhood, Lower East Side, New York, and he definitely had to fight. So,
well, that's the thing, man, especially
Bogart was a guy who came from privilege.
Really?
His mother was a famous artist. In fact, he was, as a baby, I think the first Gerber baby on the jar. His mother painted it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He came from money, whereas like Cagney came from the streets, so.
Well, it is interesting because if you go back to the turn of the century, when most of these guys were either born or young, that's when you had all this sort of legal immigration going on in the United States, where you had in those melting pots of Irish and Italian, and those were, those were poor areas, and guys were scrapping to just survive.
Sure. Yeah. Then you had the Depression, so nobody was making money, or you had to figure out ways to do it.
Yeah, only the strong survived, man, and that's definitely for sure.
Hey, speaking of money,
yes,
that reminds me about this episode, because at one point Kirk says to Spock jokingly, "Do you know how much Starfleet has invested in you?" And he starts pouring out that 1 million, blah blah blah.
Yep.
What are you talking about? I thought you didn't have any money in your
that's
credits
true,
or Navy beans. What do you?
Well, it could have been credits.
Right.
Could have been, that's how many credits they had invested in you. But that is
what's a credit then? It's a tender. It's a legal tender.
Yeah, it's like he did say money, or did he say money?
He didn't finish it.
Oh, he just said how much Starfleet has invested in you.
Yeah,
or how much?
How how much Starfleet has invested in you? 1,200,000 and blah blah. And then he goes, "That's that." Yeah, that's funny.
Well, then it makes you wonder: did Spock get special treatment? Did he get special recruitment?
Is Spock skimming on the side? Let's get Doge to look at
Chekhov's going, "Hey, they didn't invest that much in me.
They gave me a shitty wig, a Davy Jones wig."
Yeah, I know. He told me to act like Davy Jones. What the heck, man?
All right, so what would you rate this one at?
I'm going to surprise everybody, and I'm going to go. Now our standard has been 5 is average, right?
Yep.
I love Vol, so that's jading me a bit. And there are bits in here that I really, really like. There's quotable bits in this episode. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go 6.5. I'm about that?
6.5. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We thanks for the $2. He might have been about to say days or hours. I don't think so.
No, there was some payola involved with Spock.
Yeah.
The recruitment, it's like college sports, recruiting an athlete. He was the only
Right.
Vulcan in Starfleet. They probably had to pay through the nose to get him.
Okay, so you give it a 6.5. I'm
Yeah.
gonna give it a flat 6.
Okay.
Yeah, it's close enough.
You
So
got- look at the chat. Everybody's pretty much online with this. Henry Jeremick's way out there with an 8.
an 8. Yeah, that's way too high.
And
Charlie
Andy-
Stevenson is with me in a 6. Danky Frankie goes 6.75. Yeah, we don't do, it's only 6.5. You only do halves. No 3/4 or quarters. So
Yeah. Now,
uh,
Lynn Green,
I'm
I
gonna
can't
bump that down to a 6.5 for you, Danky Frankie.
bring up Lynn Green, will you? She has a 7. Do you see her there? Or
Yep.
okay, just bring her up on screen for a second. Now, is she an Orion slave girl or is she the She-Hulk?
Well, I'm
Yes,
assuming
sure.
she's an Orion slave girl because
Okay.
of
Yeah.
you know,
Because it's a Star
her
Trek show,
knowledge
right?
of Star Trek.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to
Yeah.
clear that up because I keep thinking, is that She-Hulk or is that Orion slave girl? Lynn, tell us.
She says yes, Orion slave girl.
Okay. All right.
Yep. Yeah, she follows it up with Orion. Yep. I figured.
All right, Lynn.
And she's from Rigel 8.
She,
Very nice. It's a lovely spot. Better
hey,
than
lots of people are from Rigel 8. It's not a crime.
Thank you, Piglet.
Well, many people are from Rigel 4. It's not a crime.
It's not a crime. You prefect. That is a good one.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
Okay, well.
All right, guys. Well, since it's just the two of us, we have hit our just about our hour mark here. I want to let you know next week we really have a good one. We have the introduction of Jerome Bixby into the Star Trek world, and he comes up with a hit with his first script for Star Trek with Mirror Mirror.
Oh,
So, yeah.
Some people, it always seems like it's either City on the Edge of Forever, Mirror Mirror, or then the way out there is it like Trouble with Tribbles, There's like always seem to be the 3 episodes when people say, what are the best Star Trek episodes that people always say. So
I never say Trouble with Tribbles.
You'd never say that?
No.
I wouldn't either, but people like it because it's funny.
It's too funny.
It is too funny.
I think it borders on but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Ron is at his son's wrestling match tonight. And Anna, I'm not
Probably is
sure.
cool.
I'm just assuming. I froze for a second.
You did. You said, I'm assuming shit.
Yep.
And then I wasn't sure if it was me or you that froze. So I was.
No,
just
it was
waiting
me. I
out.
could see my internet switched for some reason to 2G instead of the 5G. Must have been an interruption in the signal.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I'm gonna have to find my agonizer for next week. I've got one laying around here someplace.
You're agonizer, Mr. Kyle.
Agonizer, please. No, Mr. Spock. No, I didn't mean it.
I gotta get me an agonizer,
Yep.
one that works too.
I don't think they actually ever made those. Were those like hand buzzers, but they were, you'd stick it in somebody's chest, right?
Yeah. So you can find them if you do a Google search on Amazon. People have made them. You can buy them.
Okay. I gotta get myself an agonizer.
Yeah. So hey guys, just another thing I want to let you know is that I was supposed to close down Joe Frankenstein on Saturday.
Is that still
and
open?
I did. It's still open. Indiegogo says it could be up to 3 business days. So if I close it on a Saturday, that would mean Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So at 3 a.m. Eastern time, which would be 12 o'clock Pacific time, is when I'm assuming it's going to close out, but it is still live.
You still have a chance.
The link is pinned to the top of the chat. So if you haven't backed that project, take a look. Time is when I say running out, I mean it could be any minute now. It's running out. So because you just never know when they're going to pop it down. So please give it a check, and I will close out the stream with the trailer for that, so you can take a look at it. So have a great night. Thank you, Aaron, and we will see you guys next week for Mirror Mirror.